It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. One person missing and concerns about a highly toxic chemical after a cargo ship collides with a US tanker carrying jet fuel in the North Sea.
So Long has collided with tanker Stena Immaculate in the outer anchorage. Both vessels are abandoning.
Calls for a rapid response plan over the environmental impact and an investigation into what could have happened. Also ahead, by-election triggered, Mike Amesbury quits as an MP after punching a man in the street. US stock markets plunge over the economic impact of tariffs. Tonight we look at the first 50 days of the Trump presidency. Hopes for peace for Volodymyr Zelensky arrives in Saudi Arabia ahead of crucial talks with the US over Russia's war. And the King in a delicate dance over hosting the US president as he marks Commonwealth Day. Plus, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello, good evening. An oil tanker and a cargo ship have been burning for much of the day after colliding in the North Sea off the coast of East Yorkshire. One crew member of the 38 on board the two vessels has not been found. And in the last few minutes, the Coast Guard said the search has ended. Thick smoke and flames have been billowing from the wreckage, and there are now worries about what's in that smoke and what has spilled into the sea. It's been confirmed that jet fuel was being transported for the US military in the Stena Immaculate, which was anchored when it was hit by the Long carrying sodium cyanide. From Grimsby, our national correspondent Tom Parmenter has this report.
The collision sparked explosions and fireballs. It was a low-speed crash with extraordinary impact. The tanker, the Stena Immaculate, had been anchored 12 miles off the coast. It was carrying aviation fuel, which has been spilling into the North Sea.
So Long has collided with tanker Stena Immaculate in the outer anchorage. Both vessels are abandoning.
The first priority was to rescue the crew members and get them back to land. 36 of them were brought safely ashore here at Grimsby. The ambulance service said none of them needed further hospital treatment. But what they're dealing with out at sea is one of the worst maritime collisions in recent British history. The tanker was carrying aviation fuel on behalf of the US Navy. It was struck by the Long, a cargo ship which had 15 containers of a toxic compound called sodium cyanide on board. Exposure to it can be serious. It can cause heart or breathing problems and even prove fatal to humans. As the seriousness of the situation emerged, the port authorities stopped all boats leaving the docks along this coastline.
VTS has put a total stop on all sailings. Nobody can get out.
It's very unusual that the shipping's actually ceased. This will cost millions of pounds just in lost revenue for the ports.
Inside the exclusion zone at sea, lifeboat crews, tugboats and other vessels were all trying to help.
A lot of people watching this would struggle to understand how two big modern vessels can collide like that.
This morning it was dense fog. Ships are on a tight schedule a lot of the time. One ship is answered. All the electronics, what modern ships have, even small boats have a lot of electronics. But somebody's got to be watching the electronics and also looking out the window.
Local leaders here have called on the government to implement a rapid action plan to contain the pollution.
There will need to be some form of clear-up operation. Of course, it's tidal in the Humber, so we have to wait for it to be a high tide to get large vessels back into port. But there will be some really serious concerns about what that will mean for local marine life and the environment more broadly.
Wildlife charities are now waiting to see what impact this has for seabirds, seals and the marine environment. The true impact of this is still not known. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Grimsby.
Well, there will now be an investigation into what happened. It's known there was fog and the visibility was poor. Here's our forensics correspondent Tom Cheshire with what we know so far.
Thousands and thousands of miles of sea all around, yet two ships in a direct and fiery collision. Here's what we know about the ships and the moments up to and immediately after the crash. Now, the Coast Guard said the alarm went at 9:48. It was sounded the site of the collision in the North Sea, 13 miles off the coast of Yorkshire. One of the ships, the Stena Immaculate, was anchored at the time, meaning it was stationary after sailing from Greece, according to ship tracking site Vessel Finder. The cargo vessel, So Long, was sailing from Grangemouth in Scotland to Rotterdam in the Netherlands at a speed of 16 knots, around 18 miles an hour, on a direct collision course with the Immaculate. Now, both ships have radar systems, which means they should have been able to detect each other at a distance of 24 miles out, experts have told us. And at 10 miles away, nautical miles away, the vessels should have been visible, although there were reports of fog and haze this morning.
If it's been put on autopilot and there's nobody on the bridge, which could happen, then it would just keep going straight on. It's, and that's what happens with a lot of the vessels. They have autopilot and it just steers the course. They don't deviate. They don't have any. There's no bends in the sea. It just goes straight. It just goes straight for miles, hundreds of miles.
Now, So Long is a Portuguese-flagged cargo vessel, 140 metres long, with a gross tonnage of 7,852. That's a measure of its volume. Put it in perspective, the tanker Stena Immaculate is, or was, much bigger, 183 metres long, with a gross tonnage of nearly 30,000. Now, it was carrying jet fuel, and that ignited, so much so that it was visible from space. This is a satellite image taken at the same time with a huge plume of smoke, clearly identifiable. At 10:20 a.m, the Coast Guard tasked a number of lifeboats to support its response. Several lifeboats, a Coast Guard rescue helicopter, were dispatched to the scene in the North Sea, along with a plane and nearby vessels with firefighting capability. Now, all that quick action meant the entire tanker crew was taken ashore safely. But the Marine Accident Investigation Branch has already sent investigators to Grimsby to understand why one ship apparently ploughed into another.
Our Chief North of England correspondent Greg Milam is in Grimsby for us tonight. So, Greg, an investigation will come, but right now there's one crew member still missing and toxic substances which have spilled.
Yeah, we've had an update from the Coast Guard tonight confirming some of those figures, that 36 people, they say, were brought ashore safely after what happened and the response to it. One person taken to hospital. There was one crew member on that cargo ship unaccounted for, and they've said tonight that after extensive searches for the missing crew member, they have not been found, and that search has ended. We're now 12 hours on from that incident, of course. The Coast Guard saying both of those vessels are still on fire. They will be monitored during the course of the night. And, of course, the question about how much of that jet fuel has leaked and the impact that will have in terms of pollution here on the coast is a significant question. We've also had an update from Crowley, the company that operates that oil tanker, saying that it was 220,000 barrels of jet fuel on board that oil tanker in 16 segmented cargo tanks. It's unclear, they say at the moment, how much of that has been released into the sea. That, of course, is the focus, how much of that comes ashore. The Coast Guard has activated a plan to see what counter-pollution measures, as they call them, might be needed. Greenpeace has said that they are watching closely. It will depend on how much of that fuel has been released, the tides and the winds, many factors as to what the impact might be here, and some very sensitive wildlife areas on this part of the East Coast. They are watching very closely, but the Coast Guard saying this incident is ongoing, and at the moment the Department of Transport has said air quality measures are normal, but all of that will be monitored through the night and into tomorrow.
Yes, lots of work to come. Greg, thank you. US stock markets have plunged to a 6-month low, and the talk is of a possible recession. At the heart of it is Donald Trump's tariffs war, which has put world markets into a downward spin. It's certainly not what Trump supporters had been expecting. They hailed their man as the saviour of the US economy, not the one who might bring markets to their knees. Well, let's bring in our US correspondent Mark Stone, who's at the White House for us tonight, and the market's being watched somewhat nervously, no doubt, by the White House, Mark.
Yeah, well, Donald Trump is a man who loves to make a noise about the markets when they're doing well. When they're not doing so well, well, then he claims to ignore them. I have been struck that today we have not seen Donald Trump. The cameras have not been called into the Oval Office, hustled into the Oval Office as they are for event after event, day after day, as they have been over the course 50 days. And we are 50 days in right now into his presidency. He is there. We know he's there because you can see the Marine on the door of the West Wing. And we have had some footage that has been released in the last few minutes of him swearing in the new director of the Secret Service. But that, as well, was an event that you might have expected in the days gone by the media to be called into, and then there would be a moment, a sort of free-flowing news conference. Not today, and I think that's probably because he knows that all the questions would be about a disastrous day on Wall Street. The Dow Jones down 2.08%, the S&P 500 down 2.7%. That's hitting a September low at one point today. And the Nasdaq down 4%, its worst session since September 2022. And some key stocks are down significantly as well, largely tech stocks. So something's up. And I think it's uncertainty, it's unease. The markets are spooked by some pretty extraordinary flip-flopping that's been going on within the Trump administration, specifically, Anna, on tariffs. This on-off, the tariffs on Canada and Mexico 1 minute, then switched off, then switched on again. No one quite knows where they are. The markets are spooked. Now, it's worth, I guess, stressing that the markets don't always necessarily replicate the real economy. But this is certainly a very interesting development 50 days into this new presidency.
We'll watch them closely, of course. Mark, thank you. Well, Donald Trump has been in office for 50 days now, and the strategy has been to flood the zone. So let's take a look at some of the big moves which have come from the White House. The administration has driven talks on Ukraine, speaking several times on the phone with the Russian President Vladimir Putin, paving the way for US-Russia talks last month, and had a public spat with Ukraine's president, which led to a freeze in military aid and intelligence sharing, and pushed Europe to increase defence spending, asking for 5% of GDP from nations. America First diplomacy extended to the Middle East too. Trump shocked many when he suggested the US take over Gaza, resettle Palestinians and turn the Gaza Strip into a Riviera. He also said he would get and take control of Greenland, and he ordered that maps be changed to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. And as we've just heard, the economy dominated so far by imposing tariffs on Mexico, Canada and China, and reciprocal tariffs set to hit many other countries, including the European Union, from the start of next month. The migration crackdown has seen detainees sent to Guantanamo Bay, while military flights have been used to facilitate large-scale deportations. And then there is the new Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, run by Elon Musk. DOGE has cut tens of thousands of government jobs, including all diversity, equity and inclusion roles. And it's taken a chainsaw to America's foreign aid agency, USAID, cutting 83% of programmes. Our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, has been to Kenya to assess the impact of those swingeing cuts to aid and has this report.
We've come to Kenya, where a decision made thousands of miles away in Washington is threatening some of the world's most vulnerable people. We're joining health workers on their rounds. This place is desperately poor. People live down sewage-infested alleys, in small, cramped buildings and tiny one-room homes.
This house is very small. Enter one by one. This is a problem. The child has no weight.
First on the rounds is Anne, a single young mother who's HIV positive. Anne is totally dependent on medicine and food that was supplied by US aid. But now all that is in doubt. She's also waiting for test results to see if she's passed on the virus to her baby.
Baby?
And is terrified for the future.
I'm so worried because if it carries on like this, the medicine could run out. The medicine gives me strength and protection. When the medicine is not there, the protector of my body is not there. So anything can just pass through me.
We had no warning. It was so sudden.
How worried are you?
Very worried. Very, very worried. My worst fear is that we are going to lose children at the age of 5, especially those breastfeeding from positive mother, because of this cat. And it is going to be worse.
How many children do you think?
Over 20,000 children across several counties that are covered by our organization.
In the area you cover, your area, your charity, you think 20,000 children are at risk?
Yes.
It's the same story wherever we go. In another one-room home, we find Irene, who's also HIV positive, with 3 children, all with different health problems of their own. Jesse is how old?
Tomorrow is turning 2.
He's 2 tomorrow. Happiness, how old are you?
8.
8. And Joseph, how old are you?
6.
6. She is also beside herself with fear for the future, but has this message for the American president.
Please, Mr. President, for the sake of the vulnerable ones, and for the sake of the young little children like this one, please do something and return the funds for us.
USAID gave Kenya around $850 million a year. Around the world, it provided 40% of all developmental aid. The Trump administration has ended 90% of its aid contracts with immediate effect. The decision's being fought over in the US courts, but its impact is already being felt across Africa.
Well, let's bring in Dominic now, who joins us from Greenland. And Dominic, you've travelled far to see the impact of this extraordinary presidency. What is your assessment?
Yeah, what we've seen, I think, Anna, is in lots of different countries, different things happening. But the common thread here is we're seeing an America shifting from what was a much more multilateral approach to its role in the world, where it believed that helping others, whether it's keeping peace in Europe or saving lives in Africa or promoting democracy, was good for others, but also good for America. Under Donald Trump, under his America First form of foreign policy, America is out for itself. And that is causing shock and bewilderment and real alarm amongst allies, particularly in Africa, where you see the danger now of potentially millions of people dying if that huge amount of American aid is not replaced, which seems unlikely because it's such a huge amount of money. And also the danger for America that it leaves a vacuum that will be filled by other soft power rivals like China or Russia. None of that is going to be good for America. And what we've seen here in Greenland, I think, is the kind of more aggressive, predatory form of foreign policy that Donald Trump seems to be replacing the old form with, where it is actually talking about acquisitively and rather imperialistically trying to acquire its neighbours, so very threatening to Canada, and also talking about trying to take over Greenland. That, I think, has been seen as a bit of a joke around the world, but if you talk to people in Greenland, they are serious about it, they are very angry about it, and they do feel very threatened and let down by an ally and a neighbour that used to protect its security. There are military bases, American military bases in Greenland, and now they feel they just don't share the same values with America. And on the eve of the election that's going to be happening here tomorrow, we have an American president actively offering investment of billions of dollars and saying to the Greenlanders he's going to make them rich. So trying to prize them away from Denmark to join America. That's unlikely to work, but what it is likely to do, I think, is to make Greenlanders more likely to vote for independence. And will that then leave Greenland more vulnerable to this more predatory approach? So it's a completely different world under Donald Trump. Whether that's helping America or not, I think, is very much in doubt. But it's certainly causing deep consternation and alarm and real fear, I think, particularly in Africa, where so many lives are at risk because of this decision to sever and end US aid.
Dominic Wycon in Greenland, thank you. Now, the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that both Ukraine and Russia need to come to an understanding that there is no military solution to the ongoing war between the two countries. Delegations from the United States and Ukraine will meet in Saudi Arabia tomorrow, but Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, who has travelled to Saudi, will leave the talking to his Chief of Staff and his Foreign Minister. It comes after a breakdown of relations between Kyiv and Washington. Here's our international correspondent, Alex Rossi.
Thank you. The stakes for Ukraine could not be higher as President Zelensky arrived in Saudi Arabia. His meetings are a prelude to negotiations between Ukrainian and American officials to mend the relationship. President Zelensky will not be part of the talks. The US will be represented by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He says it's important Ukraine is prepared to do difficult things. The talks are taking place here in the port city of Jeddah. Saudi Arabia is emerging as a major power player. It's seen by both the United States and Russia as a neutral venue, and much is riding on these negotiations. The ambition from the delegations is that by the time they conclude, they hope that they will at least have the shape of what a ceasefire deal will look like.
Your country is in big trouble.
Can I answer? But there is a lot of work to do before that. Remember this?
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, a diplomatic spat to end all diplomatic spats in the Oval Office, which left US-Ukrainian relations in tatters. And in Ukraine, the consequences of the breakdown have been catastrophic. An uptick in Russian attacks after Washington cut off weapons shipments and intelligence sharing.
We want to do anything we can to get Ukraine to be serious about getting something done. You know, I say they don't have the cards. Nobody really has the cards. Russia doesn't have the cards. They don't have. What you have to do is you have to make a deal, and you have to stop the killing.
But the Russian position is far from clear. The Kremlin saying its objectives remain the same. It keeps all the territory, and Ukraine is demilitarized.
An awful lot of the evidence, including the language about this is Ukraine's fault, they started the war, which is demonstrably a lie, that kind of thing does not suggest to me brilliant deal-making. That suggests to me that America has sadly begun to take sides with Vladimir Putin rather than with the democratic elected government in Ukraine.
This meeting in Jeddah will be watched closely by the Russians. But if Ukraine's position is weakened further, there may be no incentive for the Kremlin to make compromises and end its war. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Saudi Arabia.
The suspended Labour MP Mike Amesbury says he will stand down after being convicted of assault for repeatedly hitting one of his constituents in the street. Well, our political correspondent Rob Powell joins us now from Westminster. So, Rob, this a shocking incident people will remember, now triggering a by-election, the first for the Starmer government.
Yes, Keir Starmer very used to fighting by-elections while in opposition, but this is his first taste of defending a seat since moving into number 10. This all started in October last year when Mike Amesbury, the Labour MP at the time, was involved in an altercation. Footage show him punching a constituent in his patch in Cheshire, in Runcorn and Helsby, showing him pushing him to the floor and then continuing to punch him while on the ground. Now, he was suspended by Labour. He then pleaded guilty to assault earlier this year and then was then handed a 10-week sentence that was then suspended on appeal. But what that did do is cross the threshold for potentially triggering a recall petition. So I think the calculation here from Mike Amesbury is that eventually he may well have lost his seat anyway, and that is why he has decided to go. He says he regrets the incident and essentially has lost his livelihood and now has a criminal record as a result of it. What it sets up for the government is basically a straight fight between Labour and Reform. Reform came second in this seat in the general election last year. Although Labour were a chunky 14,000 votes ahead, Reform have been licking their lips over this contest or potential contest for a while. They've been putting in the work in the broader patch in the northwest as well, and I think they would hope for a strong performance given some of the gloomy poll ratings for Labour, given some of the unpopular, controversial announcements that Sir Keir Starmer has had to get out in this early part of this term and his time in office. So I think if Reform did take it, it would cement that narrative of a party on the march. It would also unsettle other Labour MPs that feel Nigel Farage is breathing down their necks. All that said, I think expectations are very high for Reform, and if they are seen to underperform, well, that could take the wind out of their sails somewhat as well.
Rob, live for us there in Downing Street. Thank you. Syria's interim president Ahmad al-Shara has signed a deal with the Kurds in the country's northeast, bringing most of the country under government control. After weekend clashes with fighters aligned to the deposed president, Bashar al-Assad, the deal merges Kurdish forces into the Syrian army. The government will also take over prisons containing 9,000 ISIS members. Social media platform X, formerly Twitter, has been hit by a massive cyber attack, according to its owner Elon Musk. Thousands of users have reported problems. Mr. Musk said it was either a large coordinated group and/or a country involved. Now, today, on Commonwealth Day, the senior royals gathered for special events in London. The subject this year was Together We Thrive, rather a poignant message in a year of such uncertainty, an escalating trade war between Canada, a Commonwealth country, and the US president, soon to be a guest of the King. Sky's royal correspondent Rhiannon Mills reports.
In the current climate, this feels like a rarity. 56 nations coming together to celebrate. The King was back to lead Commonwealth Day after missing last year's due to his cancer diagnosis, along with the Princess of Wales. The theme of the service, Together We Thrive, felt particularly pertinent at a time when certain members could do with a hand, hit by the effects of the Trump presidency, with America cutting aid budgets and Canada facing a trade war, raising questions about the real purpose of this family of nations.
The Commonwealth has been bound together, not by a treaty, but by our values. We've stood together, we've fought for freedom, for peace, for unity, for the whole world. And I think today is so extraordinarily poignant as we come to honour those who gave their lives and their service for our freedom.
The Commonwealth has had a reputation as being an ineffectual talking shop, and that's not been helped in recent years by the debates over historical slavery and the lack of reparations, despite the best efforts of the royal family to try and reinforce that the Commonwealth is an important body of nations. Protesters had brought along Chuck the Rex to make their point.
The royals never speak on these issues, and they just come along and have all these platitudes about the Commonwealth being a big family, and it isn't. You know, it's a very hollow, small organisation which doesn't represent the people of the Commonwealth.
The royals are becoming much less popular. People are disinterested, and one day will be a Republican. Not in my time, but certainly in my grandchildren's time.
It's one of the reasons why the King decided to do this playlist, to make the Commonwealth more relevant to a younger crowd. Here you won't see any sense of reluctance to be involved, but the lack of interest to take on the 2026 Commonwealth Games because of the cost, with Glasgow again picking up the baton, is no doubt one reminder the Commonwealth still has hurdles to overcome. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, joined by The Sun's chief political correspondent, Jack Elsom, and The Guardian's deputy political editor, Jessica Elgott. Lovely to see both of you. So among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front page of The Eye, the headline for tomorrow's newspaper, jet fuel spills into the North Sea. That and plenty more when we come back.
Here we go.
2, 1.
You, Sophie.
The big announcement, the battle for number 10.
The drone is above us.
It is a chaotic scene.
They've asked us to leave.
It is a clear Labour landslide.
The car is covered in.
Liberated but left in ruins.
A major incident has been declared.
That's when misinformation floods the zone.
It became clear the media weren't welcome.
These extraordinary images.
Must have taken years.
Who wants to talk about politics? OK, stand by.
I wouldn't be asking it if I didn't think it was a relevant question.
The winner of the 2024 presidential election.
Quite extraordinary events.
are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories. The search for a missing crew member has been called off tonight after a cargo ship collided with a tanker carrying aviation fuel 10 miles off the east coast, causing both vessels to explode in flames. The suspended Labour MP Mike Amesbury has said he will stand down after being convicted of assault for repeatedly thumping one of his constituents in the street, leading to Sir Keir Starmer's first by-election. And US shares have fallen sharply again amid uncertainty in the American economy. Tesla shares plunged by at least 15%, and the Nasdaq has closed down more than 4%. Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the Sun's chief political correspondent, Jack Elsom, and the Guardian's deputy political editor, Jessica Elgott. Welcome and lovely to see both of you. So to the front pages then, let's start with the Eye. It leads on the collision off the Yorkshire coast between a tanker and a chemical cargo vessel, which caused a massive fire and repeated explosions. The Metro sums the events up in one word: catastrophic, after the collision prompted concern over possible fuel spills. And the Sun, too, a one-word headline: hellfire. The FT reporting on the stock markets tumbling after President Trump refused to dismiss a possible recession. The Telegraph says new measures advanced by Angela Rayner. Farmers could be compelled to sell fields at lower prices, prompting widespread concern about the impact on rural communities. The Guardian says the Prime Minister has labelled the nation's jobless figures indefensible in a push to overhaul benefits. Daily Express reports that there's been a massive security breach at the Ministry of Defence after more than 260 phones disappeared in 2 months. And the Star claims AI is trying to make the internet impossible for us to understand. I don't need the AI for that, to be fair. But anyway, Jack and Jessica are here. Dramatic pictures leading the newspapers, including yours in the Sun. The headline there: hellfire in the North Sea.
Totally shocking, and you're right. This picture of the two ships just exploding into a massive series of fireballs, making lots of the front pages today. And when you look at those images, I think it's pretty miraculous that so far we've had no confirmed fatalities, more than 30 people rescued, although obviously, very sadly, we have someone who still hasn't been recovered and the search is being called off tonight. I think what many people are going to be looking at these pictures now asking is, how the hell was this allowed to happen? Because you had a stationary vessel, you then had another vessel which seemed to T-bone right into the side of it. Usually in these cases, there's three main reasons why ships crash. One is very bad weather, one is human error, and the other is a mechanical failure. And so I think that there's been an investigation launched tonight into exactly how this happened. I think the Transport Secretary just confirmed that. But many people will be seeking answers to this pretty horrible tragedy.
Yes, and I mean, the reports of people, jumping off the vessels? I mean, the size of these ships to jump off.
It'd be like jumping off a bridge.
You damage yourself, yeah, indeed.
It would completely be like jumping off a bridge. I mean, you can't really, it doesn't do it justice just how high those things are, but also just how big they are as well. It will take something like that vessel a long time to stop when it's going at full pace, because they just carry so much momentum and so much weight.
And clearly, the search for the one missing crew member called off tonight, but, one hopes possibly on that score. In the meantime, the focus will be to the environmental disaster. The Eye: jet fuel spills into the North Sea. This was a vessel chartered by the US military, and the other vessel was carrying toxic chemicals.
I mean, it's the worst of all possible combinations, it seems like, when it comes to the potential environmental impacts. We know that there is some very specially protected environmental areas around there, potentially even a seal reserve. Tonight, the Transport Secretary is saying she doesn't think there seems to be a risk so far to air pollution, anything that might affect sort of people living around those coastal areas. But it's going to be an incredibly intense clean-up operation that's needed once the sort of the daylight lifts and we see the full extent of it.
Well, we just had a statement actually issued by the Transport Secretary, Heidi Alexander, suggesting that the Maritime Accident Investigation Branch has now begun a preliminary assessment. She's working closely with the MCAs. They conduct an assessment of any counter-pollution response which may be required over the coming days, and also thanking the Coast Guard, the RNLI, other emergency services who responded to the incident on the scene swiftly, she says. They helped rescue those in immediate danger. I know they will continue to work tirelessly over the coming days. My thoughts are with all those involved, especially the family of the missing crew member. And then goes on to give a bit more detail about the vessel. So, you know, an investigation very much needed. If we take a look at the Daily Telegraph, it's saying out loud what some people have been suggesting, that foul play has not been ruled out. Is that because one vessel was stationary, as you put it?
Well, it is quite odd, isn't it? And the Daily Telegraph today have a government source telling them that investigations are obviously at a very early stage, and those MAIB investigations often take a very long time to come through. But they are saying that the incident could not be not attributed to foul play, i.e. foul play could not be ruled out at this stage. If that is the case, and I think that it is pretty quite unlikely at this point, but if it is the case, often massive national security implications, especially when you consider that this tanker was carrying jet fuel for the United States military. So, you know, all sorts of questions start popping up in your mind, don't you, when it comes to these sort of things, although, you know, it's obviously just speculation at the moment. Nothing's been ruled out, but nothing's been ruled in, so I think we should probably treat it with a bit of caution.
And you know, a ship on autopilot is another explanation as well, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and given the geopolitical climate, obviously, I think, and things being at a very early stage, obviously, I think that officials aren't absolutely ruling that out. It'll clearly be something that they want to look at. Most people, you know, in government guiding away from that tonight, you know, as a possibility. But of course, it is going to raise questions because this is in daylight. This is two large ships. We were operating autopilot. How this happened, how those, as Jack was saying, it's quite difficult to understand how this happened, and something that the investigation will obviously need to get to the bottom of.
Yes, fog, of course, bad visibility may well be part of that investigation as well. Let's go to that geopolitics, shall we, which is also on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. Trump set to lift Ukraine weapons ban as soon as, says today here, which is out tomorrow at this point, isn't it? An American ban on sending weapons and intelligence to Ukraine could be lifted as early as Tuesday when peace talks begin in Saudi Arabia. Now, this is fascinating.
Yeah, and I mean, this weapons and intelligence ban really does seem to be hurting Ukraine on the battlefield. It also seems to have shimmied them along into potentially giving more concessions than they might otherwise like to have done, whether that is ceasefire in the air and in the sea with Russia. Good news seems to be coming out of Saudi Arabia at the moment, where tonight in Jeddah we have those talks between Marco Rubio and American officials and then Ukrainian officials. All seems to be coming to a head about whether or not they can be in a position to start peace talks with Russia. And the price of that could be some concessions from Ukraine, but they badly need that military and the military intelligence and weapons going back to the front line. So while they get to that point of having a ceasefire with Russia, they can continue to repel Russian forces, which are now putting on a bit of a renewed offensive, especially in that Kursk region in Russia. And so, and Keir Starmer obviously seems to be lobbying Donald Trump tonight, had a phone call with him in which he obviously pressed to have this embargo lifted. So hopefully we get some white smoke out of that in the next few hours or days.
Yes, and we've just had fresh pictures in, actually, of the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio meeting the Saudi Crown Prince as well, Mohammed bin Salman, as you can see. He's also spoken to Volodymyr Zelensky, who was there, but not actually speaking to Rubio, it seems. The latest we're hearing that they talked about promoting a stable government in Syria, Houthi threats in Yemen, reconstructing Gaza with the Saudi Crown Prince. That's according to the State Department in a readout of that meeting. You know, it just shows how much there is to discuss right now, quite aside for, you know, trying to thrash some sort of deal together for Ukraine.
Yeah, and the Saudis finding themselves very much in the middle of lots of those kind of big geopolitical flashpoints, whether that's Gaza, and clearly Trump's got a fairly outlandish plan that he wants to perform there. He's new threats against Hamas over the weekend, where he was saying, that he was happy for Israel to resume the war unless they moved on to the next stage of the ceasefire talks. Also on Ukraine, Rubio, yes, things seem, as Jack was saying, things seem slightly more positive when it comes, to resuming aid, resuming that intelligence. But even today, Rubio is saying things like, well, you can't expect Russia to give all of Ukraine's territory back, which feels like one of those important concessions that really should come via the talks rather than the US making that on Ukraine's behalf. So I still think we're at a very difficult and delicate stage of all of this.
The Saudi Crown Prince also, as I said, meeting Volodymyr Zelensky, saying that he reiterated the kingdom's support for all international efforts aimed at resolving Ukraine's crisis and achieving peace. That's also on the front page of The Guardian. High-stakes talks aim to mend Kyiv's rift with the United States. Is that really the fundamentals of what Tuesday's meeting is about, then?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you've got people saying, Steve Witkoff is one of the envoys there who's looking after these talks, saying, well, the apology from Volodymyr Zelensky last week has gone some way towards mending those relationships. But yes, I think, even Downing Street will acknowledge that lots of the effort at the moment is going into mending those relationships between Washington and Kyiv, rather than even starting to talk to Russia. And so that shows you how far off we really are from a real deal.
And the pressing question, obviously, for people like Marco Rubio is, where are your demands of concessions on Russia? And little is said about that.
We don't seem to have anything at the moment in terms of what Russia are going to have to give, apart from a pretty vague and loose statement from Donald Trump last week in which he said that sanctions may be a possibility if they stop, unless they stop lashing Ukraine. At the moment, it doesn't seem any signs of cajoling them to pull back, because we've heard pretty harrowing reports of more drone attacks from Russia, more aerial bombardments, capturing some of those cities inside Russia, which Ukraine had managed to occupy in that cursed region. They clearly now are putting on a massive offensive, potentially realising that this is going to come to a head at some point and both sides will be forced round and they're going to carve up various bits of territory. But yeah, hopefully we get some sort of good positive news from Saudi Arabia when it comes to military intelligence.
Yes, indeed, and the first talks seem to exclude both Ukraine and the European Union, or Europe, should I say, because it includes the UK in that. Ukraine now at the table effectively. And do you think the spat in the Oval Office allowed an opening also for Europe to have a voice in this now?
Well, it seemed to at first, but again, we're sort of hearing slightly less about this proposed peace plan that the UK and France are going to put forward.
A video call this coming
this weekend.
Yes, with all the leaders again. Yeah.
Yes, but I mean, it depends. It sort of depends now what happens in Jeddah and whether they manage to sort of break through some of the relations between Ukraine and the US. Loads of it is going to have to bend depending on what they talk about there. So clearly, Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, they want to be part of brokering the peace here. I think they see themselves as being able to support the Ukrainian position. But, he's under, obviously, Zelensky's under enormous pressure from the US to agree to things quite quickly, whether it's the minerals deal, a faster ceasefire. And so we'll see whether events kind of overtake what can happen this weekend.
Busy time for world leaders, keeping on top of all of this, isn't it? Lots more still to come to in the next part of our programme, including after the suspension of Rupert Lowe, the civil war continues for reform as Elon Musk considers backing a breakaway party. Back in a moment.
I want to start the programme today with a name, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people. This is the Politics Hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No, but
I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the Politics Hub, we like to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it?
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Can you beat Donald Trump, Governor? President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, our God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Free, wherever you get your news.
Excited. I've had severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Joining me once again, Jack Elsom and Jessica Elgott. Welcome back to both of you. Let's go to the Financial Times. We were used to the Conservative Party being something of a political soap opera. It feels like reformers jumped straight in it, and now with the backing of Elon Musk.
Well, potentially, according to the FT. I mean, this was really that incredible fallout between Nigel Farage and one of his prominent MPs. Well, he's only got four now, it was 5, Rupert Lowe. And Rupert Lowe, it doesn't seem, after all the mudslinging of the past few days and tit for tat, there's going to be a route back for him into reform. I don't think, although the Conservatives seem to suggest the door is open, that will be an option because he's criticised the Conservatives a hell of a lot. So it looks like now he might go it alone, and it looks like he might just have the backing of Elon Musk. Previously touted to give Reform Party £100 million, but then went a bit cold on Nigel. But actually, the reason Rupert Lowe...
That is an understatement for...
Well, exactly. Well, he said that Nigel Farage isn't now the person to lead reform, and actually gave Rupert Lowe the nod. And that's really where Rupert Lowe... Exactly. Maybe started to get airs of grandeur and realised that, oh, maybe I could actually do this job and become Prime Minister. And now it looks like he might break away and form his own party.
So who would be in this little party then?
Well, there's some suggestions tonight of people who have come at Nigel Farage in the past and been bumped off by him. Ben Habib, the Telegraph suggests, former deputy leader of Reform, who now also had a very acrimonious falling out with Nigel Farage, could be a part of that. So who knows? Maybe it's sort of the the old guys, the old gang back together coming to take on their old leader.
And history's littered with them, isn't there? They've tried to take on Nigel Farage and been thrown out of the various parties.
Yes.
But the point you were making is there's a by-election coming, and they had momentum. Have they scuppered their own momentum here?
Well, I think that they almost certainly have damaged it. I mean, this by-election that's coming up in Runcorn, you'd have thought that even though it's got a very, very healthy Labour majority, that Reform could have had a go at taking that, especially with a low turnout, with the government struggling a little bit, especially on cost of living. And now it feels like reform just looks pretty chaotic, to be honest. You know, they've got 5 MPs. They're in a fight to the death with one of them. One of them's thinking of starting his own new party. And I don't think, as well, the kind of associations with Trump has really helped the party either. It's felt like Farage has stumbled a bit when it comes to the response on Ukraine. And so all of this, I think, doesn't add to an air of respectability that they're trying to garner.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, Rupert Lowe is obviously very well known and liked within the grassroots of reform, so that whole row is going to demoralise lots of their base when they need to get them in knocking on doors in various constituencies, something they haven't really had before. They've been very good at the air war, but it's, you know, getting into the nitty-gritty of knocking on doors and pounding pavements, which they've lacked. But I do still think that this is Nigel Farage's party. Any sort of party he's led in the past has been a one-man band. He's probably got the most face and name recognition of any politician in Britain, I reckon, probably even more than the Prime Minister.
I thought you were going to say more than Liz Truss.
Even more than Liz Truss, I would say. Yeah. And Rupert Lowe, he's big on Twitter. Does he really command the same amount of following as Nigel Farage? I don't think he does, and so I still think that Nigel Farage is going to be the man to lead them.
And some difficult decisions coming up for the Labour government, including on welfare, more evidence of which is in your paper, The Guardian.
Yes, so Keir Starmer was talking to a private meeting of the Labour MPs tonight, where he said that, you know, that the number of people who are jobless in this country is indefensible. The number of people who are having to take disability payments is something that the government needs to tackle. He says they've ended up in the worst of all worlds, where the system is incentivising people not to work when they might be able to and might be able to get fulfilment from it. And there's a lot of discomfort in the Labour Party about the big cuts that we think are coming down the line. MPs told me tonight when we were outside the meeting that, you know, he was trying to give them the case that they could make, you know, the moral case for how much it's better for people to be in work. But even in the room, there were people, there was one MP who raised the case of his own disabled daughter and about personal independence payments. MPs said to me they didn't think that Keir Starmer had a really good answer for that guy and didn't even really address the concerns directly. So I think it is going to be a tricky one for the party.
And you've got 30 seconds left, but I know you want to talk about the Sentencing Council versus the Minister.
I mean, this is an extraordinary clash between the executive branch, the Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood, and independent judges over these new sentencing guidelines, which came out last week, in which it was suggested that ethnic minorities, religious minorities and transgender people could be given softer sentences because they would be basically having to take into account those factors when deciding to take them to jail. The Justice Secretary wrote to the Sentencing Council saying, I want you to drop these. It's giving the impression of two-tier justice. The Sentencing Council today have come back with a very, very robust no and saying that Shabana Mahmood is in very big danger of treading on the impartiality of justices. So it's a big old row between Labour Justice Minister and the independent judges. Fascinating.
Jack and Jessica, thank you. See you for more in the 11. Right now, let's take a look at the weather.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, a developing northerly wind will make it much colder over the next few days, with wintry showers and widespread overnight frosts. Expect below-average temperatures into next week. So mostly fine but cold start tomorrow, an extensive frost over northern and central parts, but the north and east will see a scattering of mainly coastal showers. Northern and eastern parts will see the showers spreading further inland during the morning, with some snow likely on northern hills.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Sky News get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.